On February 28, 1983, television history was made. More than 105 million Americans sat in front of their TV screens to watch the final episode of MASH. The episode was called Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, and it lasted 2.5 hours. 4 decades. It remained the most-watched television broadcast in American history. And even today, it still stands as the most-watched episode of any scripted TV series ever made. That night was not just the ending of a show. It felt like saying goodbye to a family. For 11 seasons, from 1972 to 1983, viewers had lived with the doctors, nurses, and soldiers of the 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. They laughed with them, cried with them, watched them fall apart, and watched them keep going in the middle of war. The show was set during the Korean War, but for many viewers watching in the 1970s, it also reflected the pain and confusion of Vietnam. MASH used comedy to talk about tragedy. It showed that sometimes people joke not because life is easy, but because life is almost too painful to face. When the finale ended, the camp was empty. The staff left one by one. Hawkeye Pierce was carried away by helicopter, and millions of people felt like a part of their own lives had ended. Now, more than 40 years later, the actors who brought the 4077th to life have taken very different paths. Some are still alive today. Others have sadly passed away. And the real stories of the cast are just as emotional, surprising, and heartbreaking as anything that happened on screen. MASH first aired on September 17, 1972. At first, it looked like a comedy about army doctors, but quickly became much more than that. The show followed surgeons and nurses working in a mobile army hospital, trying to save wounded soldiers while dealing with fear, exhaustion, loneliness, and the madness of war. At the center were doctors like Hawkeye Pierce, Trapper John McIntyre, and later BJ Honeycutt. They were funny, rebellious, and sometimes childish, but they were also brilliant doctors carrying the emotional weight of death every single day. Number 1 is Alan Alda, the man who played Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce. Alda was the soul of MASH. He was the only major cast member who stayed with the series from the beginning to the end. He appeared in 256 episodes, directed several episodes, and even helped write the famous finale. Alan Alda was born on January 28, 1936, in New York City. Entertainment was already part of his world because his father was an actor and his mother had been a performer and singer. Alda also had real military experience because he served in the United States Army Reserve, and that helped him understand parts of Hawkeye's world. What many viewers may not realize is how seriously he took the role. He wanted Hawkeye to feel real, not just funny. He studied how surgeons moved, how they spoke, and how they handled pressure. He also pushed the show to become deeper and more honest about war. In the early years, MASH was more of a comedy. But as Alan Alda gained more influence, the show became darker, smarter, and more emotional. It could make viewers laugh one minute and leave them silent the next. Hawkeye was sarcastic and wild, but underneath the jokes was a man slowly being damaged by everything he saw. Alda made that pain feel real. After MASH ended, Alan Alda continued working in television, film, writing, and public speaking. He wrote books, appeared in major projects, and became known for helping explain science and communication to the public. As of 2026, Alan Alda is still alive and remains one of the strongest living links to the legacy of MASH. His story is one of survival, success, and a career that continued long after the 4077th closed its doors. Number 2 is Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John McIntyre in the early seasons. Trapper was Hawkeye's best friend, partner in mischief, and fellow surgeon. Together, Wayne Rogers and Alan Alda created one of the best friendships on television. Their chemistry felt natural, funny, and warm. Trapper and Hawkeye were not just co-workers. They were brothers trying to stay sane in a war zone. Wayne Rogers was born on July 7, 1933. He grew up in Alabama, studied at Princeton, and later served in the United States Navy. He had charm, confidence, and an easy screen presence that made Trapper John feel relaxed and believable. But what many fans did not know is that Rogers had a completely different side beyond acting. After leaving MASH, Wayne Rogers reinvented himself. Instead of only chasing more acting roles, he became successful in business and finance. He later appeared as a financial analyst and commentator on television, surprising many fans who only knew him as the funny doctor from the 4077th. Rogers proved that his life after MASH was not limited to Hollywood. He built a second identity in a completely different world. Wayne Rogers died on December 31st, 2015, at the age of 82. His passing reminded fans of how important Trapper John had been to the early magic of MASH. Even though he left before the show ended, his friendship with Hawkeye remains one of the most memorable parts of the series. Number 3 is McLean Stevenson, who played Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, the early commanding officer of the 4077th. Henry Blake was not a strict military leader. He was confused, overwhelmed, gentle, and often unsure of himself. But that was exactly why fans loved him. He felt like a normal man, trying to lead people through an impossible situation. McLean Stevenson was born on November 14th, 1927, in Illinois. On MASH, he gave Henry Blake a kind and human quality. He was not perfect, but he cared about his people. His final episode, Abyssinia, Henry, became one of the most shocking moments in television history. Viewers expected Henry to go home safely. Instead, they learned that his plane had been shot down and that he had died. For a comedy series, that moment was devastating. Stevenson left MASH after 3 seasons because he wanted to become a leading man in his own shows. He believed he could have a bigger career outside the ensemble. But sadly, that major success never really came. He continued acting, but none of his later projects reached the level of MASH. His story became one of the great examples of how dangerous it can be to leave a legendary show too early. McLean Stevenson died on February 15th, 1996, at the age of 68 after suffering a heart attack while recovering from bladder cancer surgery. His character's exit remains one of the most heartbreaking scenes in TV history, and his real-life career reminds us that fame can be unpredictable and unforgiving. Number 4 is Larry Linville, who played Major Frank Burns. Frank was nervous, arrogant, jealous, and often ridiculous. He was the kind of character viewers loved to laugh at because he took himself so seriously while everyone else saw through him. Hawkeye and Trapper constantly targeted him with jokes, and Frank became one of the show's most famous comic villains. Larry Linville was born on September 29th, 1939, in Ojai, California. He was a trained actor who studied seriously, including at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London. What many people did not know is that Linville was nothing like Frank Burns in real life. Cast members described him as warm, funny, generous, and professional. That is what made his performance so impressive. He played an unlikable man, so well that viewers sometimes forgot the actor behind the role was completely different. For 5 seasons, Linville made Frank Burns unforgettable. But eventually, he left the show and continued acting in other projects. Like many MASH cast members, he worked steadily but never found another role that gave him the same level of fame. Frank Burns followed him for the rest of his career. In 1998, doctors found a malignant tumor beneath his sternum. Linville underwent serious surgery and fought cancer bravely. Those close to him said he faced the illness with remarkable strength. But after a long battle, his health worsened. On April 10th, 2000, Larry Linville died from pneumonia connected to cancer complications. He was only 60 years old. The man who made millions laugh as Frank Burns passed away quietly, away from the spotlight. Number 5 is Harry Morgan, who played Colonel Sherman T. Potter. When McLean Stevenson left the show, MASH needed a new commanding officer, and Harry Morgan brought a completely different energy. Henry Blake had been scattered and nervous, but Colonel Potter was steady, experienced, and wise. He became the father figure the camp needed. Harry Morgan was born on April 10th, 1915, in Detroit, Michigan. Before joining MASH, he already had a long career in movies and television. He was a respected character actor with decades of experience. He had also served in the United States Army during World War II, so he understood military life in a way that helped shape his performance. Colonel Potter was tough, but he was fair. He could yell when he needed to, but he also cared deeply about the people under his command. Morgan made him feel like someone who had seen the world, survived it, and still kept his heart. He gave MASH a new kind of emotional center. After the show ended, Harry Morgan continued working in television and film. He remained active for many years and became one of the most respected older actors in Hollywood. On December 7th, 2011, Harry Morgan died at the age of 96. He lived a long and successful life, and his performance as Colonel Potter remains one of the most beloved roles in the entire series. Number 6 is David Ogden Stiers, who played Charles Emerson Winchester III. Winchester joined the show after Frank Burns left, but he was not simply a replacement. He was a very different character. He was wealthy, educated, proud, and often snobbish, but he was also deeply talented and, at times, surprisingly vulnerable. David Ogden Stiers was born on October 31st, 1942, in Peoria, Illinois. He was a classically trained actor with a powerful voice and serious stage presence. What made his performance so special was the way he added layers to Winchester. At first, viewers saw him as arrogant and difficult, but over time, they saw his loneliness, his dignity, and his humanity. He could be funny, cold, emotional, and heartbreaking all in the same episode. After MASH, Stiers built a strong career in television, film, animation, and music. Many younger audiences knew his voice from animated projects, while others respected his work as a conductor and musician. He was not just an actor. He was a creative person with many talents. David Ogden Stiers died on March 3rd, 2018, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the age of 75. He left behind a legacy as one of the most skilled and versatile performers connected to MASH. Charles Winchester could have been just another arrogant doctor, but Stiers turned him into one of the show's richest characters. Number 7 is Loretta Swit, who played Major Margaret Houlihan. In the early years, Margaret was often known by the nickname Hot Lips, but Loretta Swit worked hard to move the character beyond that label. She wanted Margaret to be seen as a strong woman, a skilled nurse, and a full human being. Loretta Swit was born on November 4th, 1937, in Passaic, New Jersey. She was trained in theater and brought real discipline to the role. At first, Margaret was written mostly as strict, romantic, and comic. But as the show developed, Swit pushed for her to become more complex. Margaret became stronger, more independent, and more emotionally honest over time. Swit won 2 Emmy Awards for her performance, and her work helped transform the character into one of the most important women in classic television. After MASH, she continued acting, but also became deeply involved in animal rights and activism. She used her platform to support causes she cared about. Loretta Swit died on May 30th, 2025, at the age of 87. Her passing marked a major loss for fans of MASH because she had been one of the last surviving stars from the original cast. Her performance as Margaret Houlihan remains powerful because she fought to give the character dignity and depth. Number 8 is Jamie Farr, who played Maxwell Klinger. Klinger began as the soldier who tried everything to get discharged from the Army, including dressing in women's clothing in hopes of being declared unfit for service. At first, the character was mostly a joke, but Jamie Farr made him lovable, clever, and unforgettable. Jamie Farr was born on July 1st, 1934, in Toledo, Ohio. He is of Lebanese descent and became one of the first major Arab-American characters on American television. What makes his story even more interesting is that Farr actually served in the United States Army during the Korean War era, giving him real experience that connected him to the world of the show. Klinger changed over time. He started as comic relief, but eventually became the company clerk and an important member of the unit. Jamie Farr stayed with MASH for all 11 seasons and appeared in more episodes than almost anyone except Alan Alda. As of 2026, Jamie Farr is still alive at 91 years old. He remains one of the last living connections to the full run of the series and continues to be loved by fans. Number 9 is Mike Farrell, who played Captain B.J. Honeycutt. He joined the show after Wayne Rogers left, stepping into a difficult position because fans had loved Trapper John. But Farrell did not try to copy Trapper. Instead, he made B.J. his own character. Mike Farrell was born on February 6, 1939, in St. Paul, Minnesota. B.J. was funny and kind, but he also carried deep sadness because he missed his wife and daughter back home. Farrell gave the role warmth and emotional honesty. He became Hawkeye's new closest friend and helped the show move into a more mature chapter. After MASH, Mike Farrell continued acting, directing, producing, and working as an activist. He became involved in human rights causes and used his public voice for social issues. As of 2026, Mike Farrell is still alive at 87. His career after the show was not only about entertainment, but also about public service and advocacy. Number 10 is William Christopher, who played Father John Patrick Mulcahy, the General Chaplain of the 4077th. Father Mulcahy was not a surgeon, but he helped heal people in a different way. He gave comfort, faith, and kindness to those surrounded by death and fear. William Christopher was born on October 20th, 1932, in Evanston, Illinois. He brought quiet strength to the role. Father Mulcahy was soft-spoken, but he mattered. He reminded viewers that even in war, people still needed compassion and hope. After MASH, Christopher continued acting, but he also became known for his advocacy work, especially connected to autism awareness. His personal life gave him a strong connection to that cause, and he used his fame to help others. William Christopher died on December 31st, 2016, at the age of 84. His role as Father Mulcahy remains one of the most comforting parts of MASH. The 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital is long gone. The sets were taken down decades ago. The Korean War ended long before the show even began. But MASH has never truly disappeared. The finale still holds the record as the most watched episode of a scripted series, and that record may never be broken because television is not watched the same way anymore. Back in 1983, there were no streaming platforms, no DVRs, and no endless online choices. If people wanted to watch MASH end, they had to watch it live. And they did. Over 105 million people watched because the show had become part of their lives. They were not only saying goodbye to characters, they were saying goodbye to a place that had helped them laugh through pain and understand the emotional cost of war. MASH was special because it never treated war like a simple adventure. It showed how absurd war could be, how cruel it could be, and how people use humor to survive it. The doctors and nurses of the 4077th were not perfect heroes. They were tired, flawed, sarcastic, scared, and deeply human. That is why audiences believed in them. Today, many of the stars are gone. Wayne Rogers, McLean Stevenson, Larry Linville, Harry Morgan, David Ogden Stiers, Loretta Swit, William Christopher, and others have passed away. Alan Alda, Jamie Farr, and Mike Farrell remain among the important surviving names connected to the show. Their lives after MASH remind us that even the most iconic television families eventually move on. But every time someone watches an episode, the camp comes back to life. Hawkeye is still joking through the pain. BJ is still missing home. Klinger is still trying to escape. Margaret is still fighting to be respected. Father Mulcahy is still offering comfort. Colonel Potter is still guiding everyone with wisdom. And the helicopters are still bringing in the wounded. That is the power of MASH. It was not just a comedy. It was not just a war show. It was a story about people trying to stay human in an inhuman situation. That is why it still matters more than 40 years after the finale. Which MASH cast member do you remember the most? Was it Hawkeye, BJ, Klinger, Margaret, Colonel Potter, Trapper, Father Mulcahy, or someone else from the 4077th? Share your memories in the comments, because every fan's memory helps keep the legacy of MASH alive.